think we're born with joy. I think that that's our natural state, and that's our natural state to inherit this joy and this abundance that surrounds us. And anything other than that is really an illusion. Happiness isn't fulfillment. Happiness is a moment, but it's not necessarily a sustained moment of that higher frequency. So I think the job that we have is to come into our hearts and connect with the people around us.
Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Sam, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you.
Sam, I want to talk about Graticube. When we met, that's really the core conversation that we were focusing on. And I was just so amazed by this amazing game that you have created back in 2020. And I'd love for you to begin sharing with us the inspiration that led you to the creation of Graticube.
Well, thank you for that. It's so nice to be here chatting with you again. And the inspiration was really from a number of sources. One was experiential and accelerated learning. So I had a background in starting out as a student in that and later becoming a teacher in that. And also the inspiration was going to Burning Man and being silent for a week. And so I had been there the year before and felt like I maybe could have connected better with people. And on my way home that previous year, thought, what was missing? What could I have done differently? How could I have really connected with people better? And what I came to was I could have better listener. And just by listening, maybe I could observe some of the patterns. And in the spirit of Burning Man, instead of thinking of, I'll be silent for an hour a day, I decided, well, everything at Burning Man is radical, right? Radical self-reliance, radical inclusion, radical participation. So I decided to participate fully for a week in silence. And as I did that, I noticed a lot of things about how we communicate as humans and how often we interrupt. So I had a little card in my pocket for when I'd meet them, and it wasn't around my neck. I wasn't trying to be a spectacle, but if someone noticed that I was silent, which not everyone did, which was also very curious, I would show them the card. And the card said, since I began to speak, I haven't stopped. So I'm choosing for a week at Burning Man to be silent. And if there's something you might want to share, I promise I won't interrupt. And that was the invitation then that allowed people to share whatever they wanted to. And then I had a card for each day of the week. So I started on Friday night. So it was Friday all the way until the next Thursday. And each card had a question on it. So like, what do you love? What do you fear? What inspires you? What so far in your life has most surprised you? Those kind of things. And so some of the questions were really good in the sense that people would open up and share, and some of them were not great. Like, who is this guy? Why is he asking me these questions? But generally, people were pretty open. And I don't know if that was just Burning Man or otherwise. But after testing that out for a week and being silent, I mean, there was a lot that I learned. And I thought, well, who am I going to share this? How can I share this? This is a beautiful experience. It was amazing. And yet, if I told you, hey, Andrea, go to Burning Man and be silent for a week and you'll experience something really great. Like, nobody's going to do that. So thinking that this was pretty unique and yet nobody would really choose to do that, how to share the experience. And as I was talking with my friend, Terry, I said, well, hey, here's what I thought I was going to do. He said, yeah, how did that go? You're crazy. And I said, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And here's what I learned. And so over time, turned it into a game. And the game has elements of time and space with the dice. So can I show you the dice?
Yes.
All right. So you have this set, so you know what these are, but this is just different words on the dice. This is the space die, right? And so these are different emotional states we may experience in our life. And then over here is a time die. And this time die also has words, of course, related to time. And so as you roll time and space, you could explore a continuum of cards. And so we have 64 of these story cards and 8 characters. And the story cards are questions, similar to what I had at Burning Man, that can inspire a deeper connection and conversation. So people can sort of have that very cursory, I call it the cocktail hour conversation, or you can go a little deeper. And so often, if you're willing to listen and you do ask a question that has some depth to it, people tend to answer, and they're very interested, and people have stories. They're there if we ask them.
And what were some of the most surprising moments while you were there undergoing this experiment and testing the questions that you had crafted? And I imagine you had possibly spent a lot of time reflecting about those questions. So share with us some of the most joyful or funniest moments while you were there.
There were so many amazing moments, and some that just landed flat, and other, where people just thought I was judging them because I was silent, right? Which is kind of funny, because if I didn't tell them I was silent, then maybe they just keep going and going and going naturally. But then they sort of felt on the spot sometimes. But for the interactions where I remember one particular interaction was, so far in your life, what has most inspired you, was the card for that day. And that was one of the most interesting cards. That sort of was one of the deeper questions that people were willing to answer and really think about and be thoughtful. And so this guy, he's with his wife to be, right? And they're going to get married tomorrow, in this moment, the next day. And the question was, what has most surprised you? And he said, well, I'll tell you, but let's go over to this other spot, right? So we walk, she's looking at something, and we go across. So it's just he and I now. And he says, the thing that has most surprised me, he says, of the 8 billion or so people on the planet, how hard it is to get along with just one. And what I realized is that in a camp where you have people interrupting each other all the time, someone might have assumed what he was going to say. And even I, being silent, I wanted to ask a follow-up question, but of course I didn't have anything to ask. So I just stayed and waited that extra beat, right? Because there's that moment where sometimes you want to jump in. And so I didn't have a voice to jump in, so it was kind of good. And I just waited. And he said, what I realized is that it's hard to have a relationship with myself. And that this person I want to spend the rest of my life with is going to be a reflection of me in many ways. She's going to reflect things about me that I don't necessarily even love. And so some of those dark areas that I'm aware of that I have a tough time managing, she's going to reflect light on that may be uncomfortable for me. So it's already hard to have a relationship with me, and now I'm going to add this other person. So I thought that was really beautiful. He was willing to share something so deep, so real. And had I interrupted, I would have not gotten to hear some of the other things he had to say. So just being willing to hold that space and be silent allowed him to feel safe, to reflect and share what he wanted to share.
How incredible. And as you're looking at the impact of the game and the conversations and the connections that it has actually created, particularly in a fast-paced world, right, where we're running and busy with so many different things, what is the most profound impact that you feel the game has had on bringing more joy to this world?
Well, I think you're right that life is very busy, right? There's this example. I was at a conference and this monk spoke, and he gives an example of a busy Indian man, because the monk is Indian. So he says this Indian man arrives at the airport, gets in a cab, and tells the cabbie, drive very fast. Let's go. We've got to get there. And after an hour of driving, of course, this executive is on his phone. He's chatting. He looks at the cab and he says, where are we? Why aren't we there yet? And the guy said, you didn't tell me where to go. You just said drive very fast. So you have this dynamic of people getting very busy, moving around, doing all these things. And the game itself doesn't do anything until we choose to play it, like anything else. So I think when people pick up the game and play with their friends, it's a decision, it's an intention to connect. And you're making time, right? Time is this wild illusion that we play with, right? And we say, well, I don't have time. Of course, we all have time. It's what do we do with it? So to me, the most profound thing is making time, setting time aside, setting the intention to be with our friends, be with our family, be with our coworkers, meet somebody new. How did your friend become a friend? Before they were your friend, they were a stranger. And so how can you be open to meeting new people? So the most profound thing is when somebody, they roll the dice, they pull a card, and there's that thoughtful moment. There's a pause. And typically it's like, well, I'm not quite sure what to do with the dice. And nothing's coming up right away for the card because they feel on the spot. Some people really feel on the spot. But that's partly the point. So many of the cocktail hour conversations are, what do you do? Where are you from? All that kind of, sort of basic autopilot conversation. And this is thoughtful. It's meant to bring up a moment. And maybe it's something you haven't thought about. Maybe it takes you back 5 years, 10 years, yesterday. It doesn't matter, but it gives you a chance to really reflect. And I think in the game, because the intention is to listen, because the intention is to really share space, people give that time. You're invited. You're welcome to spend another moment to think and to consider. And I think that's what's profound, giving each other that space and that time to really to be with the questions, the mysteries of life.
Yes, and it's through those gifts that we can also experience more joy in our lives.
And when we get to share it, some people feel very alone, right? And then when we share a story, it's true for us, and it really comes from our heart. First, you can feel it, right? In the game, you have these gratitude cards, right? These are the red cards here that you can hand to somebody if you're feeling resonant with what they've shared. And then there are blue cards here for curiosity. So there's a way to keep the conversation going, go a level deeper, and connect at that heart level to say, I'm giving you this gratitude card because I really appreciate what you shared and it resonates with me because. And so we have that chance to share. And sometimes not. You just hand a card and it's just enough to say thank you. But other times it may be a way to share, well, what you shared about your mom is true for me too. And there's a card in here that says, there's a curiosity question, which is an invitation, right? You don't have to do anything. You're not obliged to answer any question. But this says, would you be willing to give or receive an outside perspective? And so instead of feeling like, that person that comes in with a very powerful opinion and you can't get a word in edgewise, it could be an invitation where you say, yes, I'm interested in hearing an outside perspective. And by the way, not always, right? Someone says, no, I'm complete. And that could be a big deal for someone. Just sharing a couple words could be a big deal. And it's just a way to respect everyone who's playing by letting it be an invitation.
Wonderful. So, as I'm thinking about all these positive impacts and moments that have been created as a result of the game that you have brought into this world, I want to talk about you and how you personally cultivate joy and gratitude in your own life, especially during challenging times.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's a very good question. For me, it's a practice of gratitude. So I think rituals are important. Systematizing things that are important to me, make them actually happen. It's like if you say, well, going to the gym is important, but you don't set a schedule to go a few times a week. So for me, it's a daily practice. When I first wake up, even before I open my eyes, as I'm starting to consciously breathe into my body. So it's, there's so much today about breathing and how important breathing is. And we all know that breathing is important, but sometimes we breathe just from like our middle diaphragm, right? So conscious breathing might say, oh, let me breathe from the lower, the middle, and the upper parts of my chest to really start to come alive and get that oxygen throughout my body. So as I'm doing that, in my first step, I breathe in gratitude, and I have three things that I breathe in once, and that's one gratitude, and I breathe out, and I breathe in a new gratitude, and then I breathe out. So those moments of taking time and being intentional to look at what's positive in my world right from the beginning, right? It's like sometimes if you're looking at two cups, one's already like filled with the negativity of the world, right? When you wake up, you don't need to do anything more. That cup's already there. And then there's this cup of gratitude and positivity. So it could be something simple like, I made it. I'm alive and I made it another day. This is great. And it could be something like, hey, today I feel safe. I woke up in a place that I feel safe. Or maybe it's, I feel that I have friends that support me that I can call on, and whatever it is. So I have my gratitudes, and I feel like whenever things are challenging, I go inside. So meditation is another part of that. So gratitude is first, sitting with gratitude and breathing it in every day. And then meditation. I meditate before I go to bed at night, which I think a lot of people do it in the morning, but I do that before I go to bed. So that really helps me sleep well and connect with me, just connect with what's important to me, get out of the busyness of the world.
And Sam, as I'm thinking and as I'm listening to you talk about where you are today and how you're looking at your life, how you're nurturing connection, joy, and positivity in this world, where did it all begin? Because clearly you have been on a spiritual journey and a very profound and deep reflection about life and the impacts that we can all have in this world. Take us back to your younger days, and what were the moments that inspired you or that challenged you that have led you on this specific path?
It's such a good question. I do think about that a lot. And I think about what is it that we're all doing here, right? I mean, just generally, right? How do we decide to go and do anything with anyone? And what I found in silence was there was this is just my perspective, of course, but I think people feel alone a lot of the time. And even when you're with other people. And so if let's say you say something and then you get interrupted, and you say something again and you get interrupted, and then you might just stop saying things. You may just shut down and decide, well, nobody really wants to hear what I have to say. Maybe they don't think I'm smart or important or whatever it is. And I think I've witnessed that. I've witnessed that throughout life, of people sort of shutting down around not feeling heard. And yet there's so much wisdom. I guess where I was most surprised is, like, in one way, you could go to a conference and you could have that guru on stage. And I've been to those conferences. I've met those people, and they're extraordinary people. And yet, so are our friends. A lot of us have that power and that strength and that knowledge. And so I think if we can tap into those resources that are right around us. So I think for me, is recognizing that in conversations. I loved meeting people, talking with people, getting to know people, traveling. I had to travel to Russia when I was 15. And that was a study abroad for 2 months and be in a high school in Russia. And so you're getting to see different ways of life, getting to see how people are in their world. And in some ways, we like to think we're very different, right? There's a national flag. Oh, that person's Mexican. Oh, that person's, Mongolian. That person's whatever. And so we come up with this idea, but I think ultimately we're human. I like to think that we're spiritual beings on a human path, right? We just have this human experience, and we're Earthians. So instead of looking at it like national flags and putting up all these fences and seeing division, I think that we're very connected. So travel for me has been a way to open my eyes and open my heart and to connect with people differently. And I think just naturally I've always enjoyed meeting new people and learning new things. So that was sort of like, you asked where it came from. My childhood was I was open to that. I was open to meeting new people. I love talking. And it's true. Since I learned to speak, I hadn't stopped. So that moment of reflection was really valuable to me. And I think often we use words to fill the silence to feel less lonely. And so I remember in one of our Graticube games, someone in Brazil shared that he felt that friendship, true friendship, one of the attributes was being able to sit comfortably in silence together as we ponder the mystery. And so I think that's a good question. How can we do that? How can we be in connection with people and allow for those silent moments comfortably?
And I know that beyond Graticube, you are also the CEO of a company that promotes health and longevity. Could you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. So a friend of mine, Marshall Thurber, he called and he said, hey, you got to check this out. It's called C60. I just took it and the pain in my knees went away. And I said, Marshall, is this a painkiller? What is it? And he says, I don't think it's a painkiller, but it's an antioxidant. And an antioxidant, and he's talking to me about the science of antioxidants. And basically, antioxidants eliminate free radicals. That's the purpose of them. And there are all different kinds of them, right? Vitamin C is an antioxidant. Blueberries have antioxidant properties. And so we're seeing all sorts of things now, hearing a lot more about antioxidants because they're sort of the thing that sits behind aging. If you think about oxidation, like metal rusting, this keeps the metal from rusting. So if you thought the metal looked really good and not so good with the rust on it because it looks aged with rust, that's the same thing that's sort of happening inside of our body. So antioxidants neutralize free radicals and their cause of inflammation, of cancer, of influenza. And so all that damage that happens to the body has a lot to do with these free radicals. So anyway, the point is that this is something so this is the product it's FullerLifeC60. And this is the outer pouch. And then inside is this little cassette. And what we did a little bit differently. So basically the conversation we had set us out on a course to come up with a different delivery mechanism. Everyone else had put carbon 60, this little black soot, into olive oil. And then if you spilled a little bit of olive oil on your clothes, then you'd have black soot clothes. And so that wasn't really the best way. And so we figured out how to put it onto like a little Listerine strip. And so inside here are 30 little strips, and you just put this under your tongue. I take a couple a day, but you can take one a day. It goes right in there under the tongue, goes into your body, and people report different things. Some people say their pain goes away. Some people feel that they have more mental clarity, better workouts, breathe better. people are like, hey, my eyesight's better, my ear. So I don't know. I can't say what it does, except that I know that it's an antioxidant, and it's one of the smallest and most powerful antioxidants out there. It has a really high ORAC value. So for those people who sort of follow that, 750,000 is the ORAC value. And that's just its ability to take on those free radicals. So it's a little soccer ball shape. It's tiny. It can get in not only the cell, but also the mitochondria of the cell in your body, which is that energy production area of the body.
And are there any ongoing research or developments in the field of antioxidants that you find particularly exciting or promising that you could share with us?
Well, the path, the way it came to be is Buckminster Fuller saw the C60 molecule in his mind, and then he wrote about it. And a few years after he died, 3 scientists got a Nobel Prize for discovering C60, C72, and I want to say another form, but they're just these carbon molecules, and it looks like, again, like a soccer ball, kind of like this that's on the front of the package. So people got really excited. They say, well, this is cool. It's strong, but what do you do with it? And he says, well, it'll be used in these different applications. It'll be used in medicine. It'll be used in construction. Graphene tubes have been talked a lot about in architecture and construction and other kind of things like racing for cars. You want something that's really strong and really light. And so carbon at a thin layer that's strong can do that in this configuration of tetrahedra and triangles that's stronger than, say, a square, right? So point is that he saw it. Scientists started to say, hey, we found it exists. We're going to name it after him. So they called it a Buckminster fullerene. And then later, carbon 60, C60, because it's a little easier than calling it a Buckminster fullerene. That's a long word. And later in the 2000s, they said, well, maybe we should try this on humans and see if it's going to be good. And said, no, you got to test on animals first because we don't kill anyone. So we're going to try it on the rats. And they tried it on the rats thinking it was a toxicology study. But the rats that in the study that took C60 and olive oil lived twice as long. So everyone got really excited because they said, wow, if that can happen in these little rats, let's try the 6-foot-tall rats. And so some of us 6-foot-tall rats have been doing this with no side effects I'm aware of. Actually, nobody's reported any adverse effects of C60, and it seems to have only positives. So you wouldn't want to take that carbon soot and ingest it like by a spoonful. That wouldn't be good for you. And you wouldn't want to put that in water. It needs to be in a lipid format. So olive oil, or you can take it on a strip like what we have. But it's been a really wild time, and it's growing, right? This is not a pharmaceutical drug. And so somebody to come out and spend millions of dollars to get FDA approved has not happened. And I don't know if that's the direction it'll even go. But the point is that for now, if you try it and you see an improvement in your health, you just keep taking it. It proves itself.
And you said also improvement in aging. So that's why you're actually 85, but you look as if you're
pretty good
25.
For 85, man. Pretty good for 85. Yeah. Back in those early 20s, I remember. I feel great taking it. And for me, I don't really have any caffeine in my diet. I mean, occasionally, like once a month, I'll have a cup of coffee, but that's about it. And so I take 2 of these before noon, and that feels really great for my energy all the way through the day. So I don't get like that lull in the afternoon. And, I eat well and I drink, good water and breathe good air and all the things we should be doing, right, as best I can. But ultimately, there's still pollution and everything. And so it's useful to have a way to combat those free radicals.
And you mentioned earlier that you have traveled around the world, have had many beautiful experiences. What have you learned about joy in the process?
Well, I think we're born with joy. I think that's our natural state, and that's our natural state to inherit this joy and this abundance that surrounds us. And anything other than that is really an illusion. So what I see is that even when I've gone to countries that have less economic output, right, where we would say, well, those are poor countries, or some people would call them third world countries, which is kind of silly because there's only one world. But they go to this place and say, look at those poor kids. And say, yeah, those poor kids have a big smile on their face, kicking whatever it is down the street, making a game of it. So I think that joy and play are deeply interlinked. And, we have a partnership with Deepak Chopra to launch a version of Graticube later this year. And when he first played the game, we'd done a lot of development. He hadn't seen the final version of it. So he sat, his friend was playing, and he says, what are you doing? She says, Deepak, this is your game. Come play it. And so he pulled a card, and the card said, describe success, and invite each person playing the game to also describe success and what it means to them. And then he rolled the dice, and the dice said joy and now. And he said, joy is the only measure of success. And I think that's true. It's funny to hear someone so smart use an absolute in their statement. And yet, as I was considering it, and I talked to Terry and other friends, I said, well, what do you think of this absolute? It's like the never say never thing, right? What do you think about this? Always the only measure of success. And I think joy has to be it. It's, for me, it's a high frequency. This word on the die here is the highest frequency word on the die other than gratitude. And if we're living in joy, no matter what's happening, but we can return to that joyful nature of who we truly are, I think we're great. So I see it worldwide. Wherever I go, I see moments of joy. And some people say that, they're following their bliss, but I think the path needs to be paved with joy. You're not chasing to go get joy somewhere else. Because if you're there, it's like the sign at a bar that says free beer tomorrow. When is free beer? Not now. It'll never be now. So if the path itself is joy, then I think life is better.
And do you see a difference between joy and happiness?
I do. It comes up a lot when people play the game. They say, joy, well, how is that different? And I do. I see a big difference between it. I think happiness is a little bit like a fleeting moment. If I were to consider the emotions like a buffet, and I'm looking at, salad over here, and there's some eggs and some meat, and maybe you have the desserts over here. Happiness is a little bit like that cotton candy high. Feels good for a moment, and you're a little jittery, and it's great, and then you crash, So I think joy is more of a lasting thing where you've gotten a lot of things from the buffet maybe, and it's balanced, that you're finding balance in your life, similar to like fulfillment, right? Happiness isn't fulfillment. Happiness is a moment, but it's not necessarily a sustained moment of that higher frequency connection with others, connection with the planet. Like, it's a lot of things to attempt to balance as we try to find, and hopefully do find, that fulfillment in our lives. And it could be, look, it could be you're joyful even though you didn't get to eat the buffet. That's another side of it. So it's not that joy is external. When I say the path is joy, I am the path of my own experience. And so I think of me being joyful as it. No matter what's happening, it's my responsibility to tap in and find my joy every moment, not for someone else to provide it, not for the food to provide it, or to be external, but it's really coming from inside me.
And talking about this responsibility that we each have, the thought that comes to mind is the reality behind the mental health challenges that many individuals are experiencing on a global scale, the number of people that are taking antidepressants just so they can get through the day. What do you think we need to do collectively to bring greater harmony and joy into our world?
It's a great question. I think part of it is out of balance by the context of the question, mental health, because we are asking the question about mental health. And yet I think if you listen to music, if you read poetry, if you look at arts, if you look at all these different pursuits, you'll see a consistent theme: get out of your mind, get out of your head, get out of your mind, get out of your head. And then we have this thing called mindfulness, which is terribly ironic for me because I feel like my mind is already full, and making it more full does not make me any happier. I think part of the problem is inherent in the question we're asking, to say that how can we find more connection in our heart and make that journey, right? I don't know what the total number of inches is, but it's about a foot from here to here. And yet sometimes that can be a really long journey. And when we play the game, for example, people are coming out of this space, or, the normal sort of default of the world, where you're wearing an avatar, right? You're wearing this like armor, and you're presenting yourself in a certain way, that this is who I want the world to think I am. And that's very mind driven, right? It's very sharp, pointed. I have to be, here's my point, people will say in conversation, right? And so there's this desire to be smarter than someone else. A lot of games are about that, about being a little smarter than someone else. And people say, how do you win at Graticube? And I said, well, play it and you'll let me know how you think you win at it. And some people, they'll have their reasons, and they're normally from the mind, right? And then later, after people play for a little bit, it's normally after the first round and the second round, it's making that journey from head to heart. So I think that's what we need to do collectively. We need to hold space for each other to get out of our heads. Our heads have a very good, clear, necessary function that we wouldn't have brains unless they were necessary. Like, you can't leave the house by tying your shoes, opening the door, if you didn't have that side of your brain. Like, you wouldn't be able to leave and go places. So it's useful, but I think it's out of balance. So I think the job that we have is to come into our hearts and connect with the people around us. And that may sound like a lot of woo-woo, tree-hugging kind of thing, but what does it look like to walk down the street and just smile at someone, but authentically? That's simple. It requires being in the heart, a mind smile, that's not really a full smile. But when you can be open with people, when you can stop to listen to anyone in your life, some people just can't wait to share. And if we would only listen. So I think the best we can do to hold space, listen with each other in that joyful moment, and play more. Why not be a little bit more playful? Let go of all that seriousness. And even in the job that you have, or whatever you're doing in your relationships, what does it look like to be a little bit more playful? And I think you see that in good leaders, by the way. Good leaders tend to be playful. They're not serious all the time and this angst. And if you see someone that's just constantly in that angst, then maybe that's not a very good leader.
I fully agree with you. So, Sam, here's what I want to suggest. I took a couple of cards from your game. I'm just going to show some here. And I want to go through some of them with you. And again, I absolutely love your game. So rather than thinking about other questions that I could ask you, I thought that I would share with everyone the beauty behind the questions that have been really profoundly articulated here, and that I hope you would be fine in answering and sharing with our listeners today. So here's one question. Describe a time when you felt inspired.
Yeah. Should we roll the dice too? See where they take us?
You roll the dice and I'll ask the question. How about that?
Okay. You ask the questions. I'm going to roll the dice. Perfect. It came up desire and now, which is great. So what first came to mind is that I feel inspired right now. I know that there's a lot of change happening in the world that people are afraid of, particularly with artificial intelligence and politics and war. And as far as I know, in a history of the world, those things have always been true. There's always been war. There have always been politicians, so forth and so on. So it's easy to get bogged down thinking about the next new technology that can ruin it for everyone. And I think that where I feel inspired is that there's so many tools available for us to see the other side of that. In other words, there's a lot of positivity. You could say the problem with AI is that kids going to school will just use that to write a paper and won't get the benefit of learning how to write well. And that could be true. I'm not negating that. And yet, let's say that somebody who's going to school who has a deep reason why, because that's what's often missing if you're not getting a great education, it's because you haven't figured out what that education is for. But imagine that person really loving school, loving what they're doing, and finding that AI can augment. So instead of artificial, it's a way to get more authentic and augment, and some of these other words, augmented intelligence. So how can we become stronger? How can we be better? We now have access to more information than even the president had 5 years ago. That's extraordinary. We should be celebrating that. So I feel inspired that I have these tools. I have amazing connections of people around me. And, ChatGPT, for example, if I go on there and just ask a question, I can learn things. Now, I don't have to accept everything that comes at me in the same way I wouldn't accept everything as a Google search result or just reading something online. But using critical thinking and the intelligence I have, I feel like I can answer for any desire that I have now, going back to the dice. Any desire that I have now, I can tap into this amazing set of tools that are available to all of humanity. I mean, just having a phone, so many. I don't know what the number is now, but it's over half of the world has a smartphone. Over half the world has a smartphone. So we all have access to this, and I feel inspired that we can have these kind of conversations. I feel inspired by the moment that we're having now, that we're friends and we're doing this important work together, and we're going to be playful about it.
Here's another question. What is one thing that you will never forget about a friend, sibling, parent, or stranger?
All right, I'm going to roll these dice. Let's see what comes up. We got trust and past. This is a small moment, but it's one that first came to mind. So I'll go with it. I had this bike to sell, right? And I was selling it for $200. It's just a black bike. And the person that wanted to buy it, I think, was on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, but it's not someone I knew. And the time frame was such that they needed to come by, and I wasn't going to be home. And so I thought, well, this is challenging with schedules, and I was getting ready to travel, and it wasn't going to work out. So I just said, okay, the bike is I'm going to put in the backyard. If you like it, then please leave $200 in the mailbox. Right. So that's a lot of trust in the past. And people who are listening right now might think, this man is crazy. He's naive and that's stupid. Right. And there's that small voice that was like, well, you know what? I hear that. I think most people would probably say that. But I felt that I could trust this person based on our limited interaction. We didn't even talk on the phone. It was just text messages back and forth. But I felt something, that trust. And so when I got home, the bike was gone and there was $200 in the mailbox. So I think there are plenty of moments where maybe that wouldn't have worked out. And there are places, maybe I live in Denver, Colorado. Maybe if I lived in another city, that wouldn't be the case. And maybe the city wouldn't, the bike would be more or less money. I don't know. But the point is that we can listen to that inner wisdom and we can trust. And so my sense is that when I do that, I'm just developing better and better and better my intuition about people. And there's certain times I would not do that. And the other times where I felt it. So what I'm saying is that we can all build that ability to tune in to who we are and begin to understand. And the more that I trust, the better my life gets. And it's not to say trust everyone, but it's to say the more I trust, the better my life gets.
And on the topic of improvement, the next question that I had for you is that also comes from your game. If you could only improve one thing about yourself in your lifetime, what would it be?
All right, I'm going to roll this die again. Regret and future. The first thing that comes to mind here is back to trust, but more a deeper trust, a belief. We were talking about earlier about Buckminster Fuller. There was a moment in his life when he felt that he was a penniless man, that he was incapable of doing anything. He had gone to school with all these Ivy League kids, and he got to a point where he felt like he was worthless. And it was I want to say it was when he was in late 20s, early 30s in his life. He had a wife and 2 children, but one of his daughters had just died of spinal meningitis. And so he was really struggling in every way with this very cosmic sense of not having purpose and watching people around him cheat in advance. They're making money. They're doing better in their careers, so to speak, because they're making more money. But they're cheats and they're liars. And he thought, well, I don't want to play that game and I don't know what to do. I'm useless. So he walks to the end of this pier and he's ready to jump into Lake Michigan and swim out as far as he can. Now, he's a good swimmer. His thought was, I'll go out as far as I can until I'm exhausted and then I'll give up, right? He was about to end that part of end his life. So in the moment he was ready to jump in, he heard a voice say, your life does not belong to you. You are a child of the universe. And it went on, and he wrote this book called The Lake Michigan Dialogues. So that's his story. And the voice he heard could be whatever. He said he didn't feel it was inside of him. He felt it outside of him. So if you believe in God, if you believe in spirits, that's whatever for you. But the point is that after that, he decided to devote himself to others fully. And he felt that wealth was the number of forward days that you could provide sustenance for other humans, period. Right. So wealth was not just the money in the bank. It's to say, well, could you provide housing and food and support and shelter and safety and so forth and so on? That was his sense of wealth. So his thought was nature is most efficient. I'm going to be, I'm part of nature. And so I'm going to give as much as I possibly can. I know that nature will give back to me if I'm adding value. So that was his theory. If I add value, nature is most efficient and it will always provide for me, if even and often at the last moment. So the reason I bring that story is because Bucky, for the rest of his life, called himself Bucky B, guinea pig B. So guinea pig B was his sense of being an experiment, right? That the universe is this grand experiment. Is the earth going to make it? Probably. Are we going to make it on the earth where it sustains us really well? Maybe, maybe not. Do we blow each other up? Maybe, maybe not. And so we don't really know what this experiment's all about, but that we're in it. And so his commitment was, I was going to die. Everything after this is bonus laps. Now, he didn't use that term. I'm using bonus laps. But he thought anything after this is a bonus. So it doesn't really matter what I do. If I were to take a risk and die, I was going to do that anyway. So now I have the freedom to commit myself to being in service to this idea, to being in service to the greatest number of people possible. And if I do that, nature will reward me. And that's what he set out to do, and that's what he did. And so back to the question you asked, but that context for me is important. I think Bucky got to a place of believing 100%. He started from not believing. He got to a point, and he talked with this voice. So that's each one. Go talk to the voices in your head. No, that's not what I'm saying. But come to terms with what is it that you think you can do to add value, and let go of maybe what other people are doing. He had to let go of other people lying and cheating and stealing to let that. It's not his frame anymore. His frame is, how do I add value? And it's for me, because this is my life. So for me, I want to get to 100% belief. I want to get to that place where, and I feel like I get a little closer every day. I believe a little bit more, as opposed to falling into the trap of, this is what you should be doing. This is what you should be making a year. This is what the house you should have, the car you should drive. There's this idea of the Instagram, Facebook happy world that's ultimately, for a lot of people, it's false. It's this false, it's a facade. So instead of looking at that and having that be my image of success, which it isn't, it's to say, how can I, even if it's just a moment on an airplane with somebody, connect authentically, or just smile at someone. I'm walking down the street and that person gets to see another person smile at them. I think that's the job that we all have, that we can do. And if we believe that job is important, then it becomes important.
So I'll let you choose now. I'll let you choose.
Oh my gosh, look at this. All right.
You tell me. So where do you want me to do this?
Right there.
There? Okay.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Let's see. Imagine that you are a pet. What care instructions should the pet sitter have?
Oh, this is great. I love it. All right. I'm rolling the dice. I've got fear and future. All right. What instructions should the pet sitter have?
What pet would you be?
Ooh, that's good. I think I would, gosh, what kind of pet would I be? I'd love to be a monkey. I know that sounds silly because I'm already a version of a monkey, but I'd have a tail and I'd have extra ability to climb, and I love fruits. So I think being a monkey would be super fun. And people seem to like monkeys. So I'd probably be, a pet that other people would like to hang out with and play with. I would say the pet sitter, make sure to feed me often. I love to eat, and make sure that it's like a varied diet, but nothing that's too bad for me. Even if I ask for it, just don't give me anything that's too bad for me. Definitely I want to play outside. I love to play outside. And if I'm a monkey, of course, I'm going to want to climb trees and just say, hey, don't worry too much. There's this fear of the future, but like, I'm a good climber. So don't worry. The owners are going to come back and they're going to be like, yeah, did he climb? Did it scare you? Okay. But it was okay. All right. And I play well with others. So bring over other animals. I play well with dogs and cats, and I would love to play with them too.
I love it. So I'll let you choose another question. And it's funny because I've actually asked you this question before in previous interactions before, but it's the same question. It's so hilarious, Sam. What is something important that you've lost?
All right. I'm going to roll these dice. Courage and future. Yes. Let's see what first comes to mind here. Courage and future. I think there are a lot of things, and I'm not sure what I said last time. Probably the dice were different, but either way, there were a few things that came to mind, but the one that is most present for me is I've lost a lot of the fear that I used to have. I used to have more fear about the future, and I guess maybe I'm a little older now, so it's easier. If I was just 18 years old, I might have a lot more life that was unknown to me to be concerned about, possibly. But I feel like I don't have that fear of the future that I once had. So I've lost some of that fear, which in a way sounds really positive. In another way, it can be a little bit dissociating when like a lot of people around me are afraid, and I'm looking over like, well, am I the weird? Is it wrong for me not to be so afraid? I don't feel normal in that way. So I lost a little of that connection with what it means to be normal, or feel what normal people feel in that way. Because so much of life is fearful for people. It's like there's a lot of fear, and then there's anger. And I'm not saying I never feel fear. I'm never angry. That's not the case. But I feel like that's something that I've begun to lose. And when I think about the future and courage from a conscious place, from my mind, because that's where some of this lives, like the fear would live in the mind. Um, it's looking at all these challenges with war and economic changes and all this, and saying, "Gosh, what's going to happen next, and what am I going to do about it?" But I think this courage, it means from the heart. I think it's originally, like, the root is French, and it means from the heart. And so I think it does take courage in our term, right? But to live in your heart,
Yeah.
to be open when people are being closed, to share your truth when people are holding back, those kinds of things. So I do feel like to let go of more fear is going to take that extra level of courage as I look at the future. And that's the future I want. The future I want is to live with less fear every day.
And talking about the future, I'm going to interject and just ask you one question. It's not from the game, and then we'll have one final question that you can choose. How do you make sure when you're looking into the future that you're living a life with no regret?
The mind is projecting some idea of what may happen, and there's fear, right? That's what's happening. So it's to get out of the projection and to live in the present. So I don't think that I can look at the future and live in the future. It hasn't worked so far. A lot of things I thought maybe will happen in the future haven't happened. Some of them have, but I don't know. It's beyond me. So the best I can do is be present. I think that's the best thing I could possibly do. And regret is one of those things of thinking there could have been another way to do it, right? I think it's, people will say, and this was true at Burning Man a lot. I had one of the cards I had was, "What do you regret?" And a great number of people that I talked with, most of them said, "I don't have any regrets," which I felt was, for me, is untrue. I have some regrets too. There are moments I thought, "Oh, I could have done this differently. I could have done this better." Yet the value of that thing that happened is for me to sit with it and become present with it, right? Not to say, "Oh," because I don't have a time machine to go back and change that. And if I did, I wouldn't, because what might that change, right? We've all seen those sci-fi movies where the whole future changes because of one decision. Who knows? Or maybe it's much better, right? Back to the Future. So for me, it's knowing I don't have a time machine, but being able to sit with, say, okay, if I choose to be present with whatever it is, even that moment, okay, there was a moment of past regret. Okay, great. How do I choose to be present with that so that I can keep being present in this everlasting now moment? Because there really isn't a past, there isn't a future. That's a mental construct. It doesn't exist. So the only thing we can do is be in that river of life right now as it flows with us.
Beautiful. So final question, Sam. This is it.
Final question.
Okay, this is which one? Hold on, let me just
countdown.
You tell me where to stop. There?
Yeah, right before the end. Yeah, okay.
Okay, this is a very profound question. Well, all the questions are profound in your game. I love it. If you were told you had only 1 year to live, what would you do with this final year?
All right. I do think that's a profound question. I'm going to roll. Ooh, look at this. Regret now. Look at this. Those are the dice. How perfect. Well, I would let go of regret right away. If there's any sense of regret, if there's any sense, like I said, I have some of those things I regret. I think the job would be right now to let those go. And I love what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. If anything, like I said before, I would dial up my belief in what I'm doing. I think it's easy to become unfocused. I'm a very creative person. So the advice I would have for myself is, bring more focus into the outcomes you think are possible, and without knowing, right? I mean, I feel like some of the things I felt inspired to do, I don't know why I was inspired to do them. I did them and then saw some outcome and was like, well, was it all for that one moment, or do I keep going? So it's tuning into my intuition a little better each time as I dial up that belief. And I have a vision of more people playing this game on their own. I have a vision of people hiring us to be facilitators for large groups and retreats and conferences and colleges. We want to be on a college tour so that we can meet people and get to share this. And it's all about them. I mean, this game, it's like there are a lot of keynote speakers out there that will talk about their journey, but ultimately what I love about this when I go to conferences is that people get the opportunity to play with maybe coworkers, maybe strangers, maybe friends that take it home to their family, but this game can be played with anyone anywhere. So for me, it's that opportunity to remind people who they are. So my focus for the next year, and that full belief, would be to remind people who they are, and give them a tool to go deeper in their relationships so that they can feel greater joy.
Wonderful. And on those words, Sam, it's been an immense pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you for everything you have shared, and thank you for all the beautiful things you're doing in this world. And look forward to staying in touch and learning about all the amazing things to come. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for what you're doing. I love your dedication to joy. You know, you for me are a great exemplar of living in joy, and I'm so happy to be on that path with you.
Thank you.